Friends of Thetis, thank you for taking the time to listen to this and most likely read the email that accompanied this video. Earlier this week, I was talking with the Thetis Island Ratepayers Association, and there was discussion of a possible all candidates meeting. My opponent didn't want to move forward with that, and in all fairness, the Ratepayers Association did say it was likely going to be difficult to arrange that under short notice. So I figured this is the second best thing. I think it's really important that you hear from me directly. So over the last 72 hours, I took the initiative to type out by hand everybody's email address so that I could send this personalized message to you one at a time. If you did receive this and you didn't want to receive this, I apologize. This is the only piece of communication you'll get from me unless you do respond to me, and then obviously be happy to communicate that way. So, who's Jesse? Well, many or some, maybe many of you might remember me. I grew up on Thetis Island with my three brothers and my parents, Don and Kathy McClinton. My dad worked on the ferry. He was a carpenter. He also volunteered with the fire department. And my mom, despite being pretty busy with four boys, she worked at the post office and also ran Katie's Kitchen, which was a pizza takeout restaurant. And despite having to take the ferry every day of my life, whether it was going to school at St. Joe's or going to hockey practice, whatever it might be, despite all that, a childhood on Thetis Island was one of the greatest gifts my parents could have ever given me. In 1990, we moved off over to Saltaire, where my parents still live and where I'm actually raising my young family. From there, after we moved over to Saltaire, I went to Chemainus High, then Ladysmith High, and like a lot of 20-year-olds do, I went away. I moved to Victoria, went to the University of Victoria, got a BA in psychology. When that was done, I went over to the UK and did a Master's of Science in Consumer Psychology. Early in my career, I worked as a child and youth counselor, primarily at the Ledger Building out of the Queen Alexander Centre, which is managed by Vancouver Island Health. And I worked with many of Vancouver Island's most marginalized youth and children. Later in life, I became interested in business and started to pursue that. For the last 5 years, I've been the owner and CEO of a consulting agency called Sticky Media. And I'm pretty proud of the work that I do there at Sticky Media. When I took over, it was just me and another employee without any clients to speak of. And now we have over 20 full-time employees and enterprise clients, mostly throughout North America. And at Sticky Media, every day I work with multiple stakeholders, different technicians, different expertise to bring people together to solve really complex problems and communicate, solutions effectively. So I think that skill set, that experience is something that I'm going to bring to the table if I do become your director, and I'm going to lean on that experience probably more than any other experience. I encourage you to check out the reviews. I put some links in the email. There's employee reviews and there's customer reviews, and while it doesn't speak specifically to the work I would be doing if I was your director, I think it does shed light on the type of person I am and my leadership style and my ability to bring teams together and to solve complex problems. So why am I running? About 8 months ago, I learned about the Saltaire Slow Pitch League and it being denied its permit to play baseball up at the Saltaire Centennial Park. And I thought it was odd. The league's been around for over 40 years, and this would have been one of the first times that they didn't get to play baseball, other than obviously counting COVID. As I began to investigate, hearing about the issues and what was going on became rather worrisome, to be quite honest, and even more so than what was going on with the baseball league and the issues there. How my good friend Amanda Redpath was being treated. She's the president of the ball league. She's a social worker, salt of the earth, does a ton of things for her community, and the way she was being treated, frankly, it made me pretty mad. I continued to dig. Things just didn't seem to be adding up. And it bothered me to think about my neighbors who wouldn't get to play, the folks from Penelakut who come over and play, just didn't seem right. And I want to be clear, I don't play baseball or actually even particularly like baseball. I think it's actually a little bit boring, but I prefer to play hockey or run. But, they like playing. And so I think, that I wanted to support that. And then so as I learned about the baseball league, I started to ask, the question like, what else is going on? And again, the more I uncovered, the more concerned I became. I learned about many of the community leaders in my neighborhood, sort of being cast aside unceremoniously, people that had been donating their time to different associations for, 2 decades, being told their services were no longer needed. And, I think there's a better way forward, and I think I can help with that. So how can I help with that? How am I going to lead? Well, the first thing is listen. I think the lack of communication is at the heart of all of the issues we're facing in Area G. So how am I going to listen? How are we going to overcome this communication challenge? Well, the first thing I've committed to do is having at least 4 community meetings every year, 2 in Saltaire, 1 on Thetis, and 1 on Penelakut. And if something comes up in between those community meetings, an important issue, there's no reason why we can't have a virtual meeting to offset and augment those face-to-face meetings, which I do think are vital and really important. For work, we have meetings, like I said, with stakeholders all around North America, people with varying degrees of technological ability, and we're typically able to pull those off pretty seamlessly. So I think that's another thing we can bring to the table and get those communication lines going. The other thing that I think is really important, and I'd like to do much more of it, is put together working groups. You guys on Thetis actually do a pretty good job, but I think there's more that can be done. I already knew this about our area. We've got a lot of smart people that live here, whether it's retired geotechnical engineers, principals, whatever it might be. We've got a lot of smart people that I think need to be included in helping solve some of these challenging problems we have to help make our neighborhoods and our communities a little bit better. And finally, the last thing I want to do to improve communication is have one-on-one conversations with you. Area G is not that big. It's about 2,500 people, give or take. And, I truly believe that I can have a one-on-one conversation with everybody that wants to have one with me. I've got one phone number, and if you call me, typically I'm going to pick up. So, there's still time before the election. If you've got some questions for me after watching this video, please feel free to give me a call. And I think those communication, the fact that I think listening is important, I think I've demonstrated that throughout the campaign. I've made a conscious effort to deliver at least one custom piece of information to every person that lives in Area G. So in Thetis, I called all, or at the very least, the vast majority of residents that live on Thetis. I invited them out to my meet and greet, and while we were talking, I learned about many of the issues that are important to residents on Thetis right now. It's been a long time since I lived there, and things have changed a bit. Lots of things are still the same though. So that that's what I did with Thetis. Obviously, this video is coming to you today. On Penelakut. The day after the meet and greet I had on Thetis, I was over on Penelakut talking with Chief Joan Brown and GM Josh James and learning about the issues that are important to them. And, I learned that they told me anyways that I was the first candidate that had ever gone to Penelakut. So, proud of that, but also, I'm not sure what else I should say about that. But I do have a few other things that I'll touch on about how Thetis and Penelakut may be able to work together on some really common goals. Yeah, and then in Saltaire, I've knocked on hundreds of doors and had lots of community meetings and worked to try to overcome a lot of the divides our community is currently facing. So issues critical to Thetis Island. Well, obviously, as I mentioned, while talking to people, inviting them to the meet and greet, I learned about all the things that are important that specifically the CVRD can help with. Ann Dickey and Bill Cobb emphasized the need for sorting out your recycling issue and getting away, having that dealt with once and for all. Dave Terrace and John Collins spoke about your dock and the issues with parking at the top of the dock and having to take, patients down on a gurney and dealing with traffic if the ferry's coming in. So, I don't have all the answers to that right now, but it seems that we got to figure out a way so that there's better access onto your dock. I also talked with Julian Jackman about his experiences working from home and all the different crazy things he needs to do to have, reliable high-speed internet access. And as I mentioned about Penelakut, when I was talking with the folks there, the dock and their dock and safety concerns around it and lack of high-speed internet connectivity were two big issues for them. So I can easily imagine a world where we unify our voice and our common effort to help expedite, on those two critical issues that we'd like to all see move forward. One other thing, funny enough, that both Penelakut and Thetis concern they have is around transit, or again the lack thereof. Lots of people put their kids on the ferry to go to dance or a club, and you can get off the ferry, take a bus to Duncan, but you can't take one to Ladysmith. And ironically, that's a bus route or transit route that goes right through your area, Saltaire Area G. So I think you've got a lot of issues and important things that you want to solve, and I think if we have an open mind and we think of creative solutions, we can work on those together. A few of the other things that folks talked about at the meet and greet specifically was issues around affordability. I mean, that's a tough one. That's something that lots of communities throughout BC and Canada are facing. Aging safety equipment was another thing that was of concern, specifically the fire truck. And then lack of walkable trails or, the ability to walk on the roads, as obviously on Thetis, you guys have pretty narrow roads. So I think I may have, I don't want to call it solution, but I maybe have some hope around that issue, which I'll talk about again in a second. So one of the reasons why I was talking to the Ratepayers Association is because they asked for me to comment on the regional recreation referendum. And I didn't want to type something up because my stance on it has changed slightly. It's a little bit nuanced. I'm still learning, and I thought it might be easier to tell you my thoughts this way. So I want to be clear, I will be voting no, but I'm much more on the fence than I was maybe 10 days ago. And that's because of some new information that I learned. I learned that the CVRD is required by law, because it's a referendum, to state the maximum amount of money that could be taxed. So in Saltaire, it's $1.19 per $1,000 of assessed value for an average home. That's pushing $1,000 a year in additional taxes. It's quite a bit. It's less on Thetis. It's a slightly different number that I don't remember off the top of my head. But what's stated legally and what's going to happen in practice are two very different things. And so if this referendum were to pass, it will likely mean about a $50 to $100 increase in taxes for Thetis and around $150 to $200 increase in taxes in Saltaire. I still think there could be a better funding model. I'm not sure it's fair, going off assessed value. It could be one person in a big house, and they're on a fixed income, and smaller family that's renting or something. So I think there could be a better way, but I think if it is to pass, either way, whether it's no or yes, we're going to be okay. I've included a link with some more information about regional recreation, so I encourage you to check that out. I'll just finish up by asking myself the question, why should you vote for me? And, ultimately, that decision is going to be up to you. But for all my flaws, I think one of the things I do well, really well, is bring people together. I build teams and help communities or groups of people solve challenging problems. I've got a pretty good track record of doing that. And further to the point, all of the candidates that ran in the last election against my opponent have now come out publicly and supported me. So Sean Jonas, he's got my lawn sign. We talk regularly and he gives me lots of advice. Leah Versiville, she is my financial agent. She's been a tremendous mentor and a good friend through this process. And then finally, Rod Smith has just recently agreed to come on board as my alternate. I'm really excited about this. Not only did he finish second in the last election, very smart man, very wise. He for his full-time work, he's a consultant with the town of Ladysmith in North Cowichan and a few other not-for-profits. And he solicits grant funding for Ladysmith and North Cowichan and those nonprofits. So, and he specifically focuses on parks, trails, transit, and the environment. Sound familiar? I think he could be an absolutely huge asset for Thetis and for the rest of Area G. So really excited to have him on board. Over his 40-year career, he's raised more than $200 million in grant funding for the various organizations he's worked at. So nothing to sneeze at. I guess I'll just end by saying, I do think, hopefully not naively, but I do think that I'm uniquely qualified to represent the folks on Thetis. I mean, I grew up on Thetis. I know what it's like to sit in a 3-sailing ferry wait. I know what it's like to drive down the hill there as the ramp's pulling up and the ferry's taking off. Unless you're 8 years old and you're supposed to be going to school and you get to stay home for an extra couple hours, that's not so bad. But I was there when the community center, the land was being cleared and the open air community center was being built. And, that sense of community that runs deep on Thetis, that's stayed with me my entire life. And, that's something you can be sure I'll continue to support if I do become your director. I've built a diverse, broad base of support, people from all different walks of life, different demographics. And again, I think that sort of speaks for itself. I don't have a magic wand. I'm not going to solve all your problems, but what I can promise you I'll do is I'll always listen and I will always advocate in the best interests of Thetis. Thanks for listening to me today. Like I said, if you have any questions, please call me. My number is 250-208-9919. And make sure you vote tomorrow, October 15th, at the community center between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Thank you for your time.